الحمد يا ذا الجود والمجد والعلا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. My dear brothers and sisters from the holy city of Medina, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We've spoken in the past about some of the early history of this holy city of Medina, especially after the arrival of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We spoke about the Battle of Badr, which took place on the 17th day of Ramadan in the second year after Hijrah, and shortly after, on the first day of Dhul Hijjah, in the second year after Hijrah, the blessed marriage of Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullah alayhi to Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam. We'll move on now to the Battle of Uhud, which took place in Shawwal of the third year after Hijrah. So in Shawwal of the third year after Hijrah, the Mushrikeen of Mecca decided to take revenge against Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alih. So they bring their forces with the army that is led by Abu Sufyan and Khalid ibn al-Walid, who was at the time among the Mushrikeen, and they fight against Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam in the city of Medina. The Prophet realized that there is a weakness in the location in which they'll be fighting, and that is basically the back of the Muslims would be unprotected. Hence, the Mushrikeen could attack them from behind. So he kept 50 archers on a hill that became known as the Archers' Hill. He told them, do not ever step down until I signal to you. And he kept a man by the name of Abdullah as their leader. Their job was to see if anyone sneaks from behind the Muslims' army, they would protect the back of the Muslims with their arrows. Muslims started fighting and started becoming victorious, and they started winning, and the Mushrikeen became weak and they started to retreat. But unfortunately, what happened is, as this retreat was happening, the majority of these archers, fearing that they would lose on the booty, so because of the love of booty, worldly affairs, worldly matters, they neglected the command of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa alih, and the majority of them came down. Their leader, Abdullah, said, we are not allowed to go down. The Prophet told us, we cannot go down until he signals to us. And he has not given us the signal yet. They said to him, leave us. We need to go after the booty. So that was a deliberate disobedience to the commands of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa alih. When Khalid ibn al-Walid saw that the back of the Muslim was now not being protected anymore, he took a few of his men and told the rest of the army to go and attack the Muslims again, to go back to fight. And he turned around and he sandwiched the Muslims in the middle, such that he attacked them and he weakened them. And unfortunately, Muslims started getting shaken, and many of them ran away. In fact, the majority of the Muslims ran away. Although the Prophet was calling them, they started running up the mountain of Uhud. إِذْ تُصْعِدُونَ وَلَا تَلْوُونَ. Quran says you started running up the mountain without even turning back to respond to the call of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That was a second deliberate disobedience of the command of Rasulullah. They neglected him, they deserted him, they left him. And only a handful of people. And history confirms that amongst those individuals was Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullahi alayhi. He did not leave Rasulullah. He fought with him until his sword was broken. Jibreel came to Rasulullah with a sword and said, give this to Ali. And he said, Ya Rasulullah, Ali is defending you with all his heart and all his life, fiercely and immensely. The Prophet said, do you know why, Ya Jibreel? He said, why? He said, because he's of me and I am of him. Jibreel said, and I'm of you too as well. So Imam Ali continued to fight, and there was that cry made from the heavens, La fata illa Ali, la sayf illa dhul faqar. But unfortunately, many Muslims got killed in that battle as well. 70 Muslims got killed. Some of the greatest of the Muslims, including Mus'ab ibn Umair, Ridwanullah ta'ala alayhi, who was the Prophet's ambassador to Medina. He is the one who helped spread the message of Islam among the people of Medina. He was killed in that battle. Abdullah, the father of Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, he was killed in that battle. Amr ibn al-Jamuh was killed in that battle, and the leaders of the martyrs, or the best of them at the time, who was given the title of Sayyid al-Shuhada, was Hamza, the Prophet's uncle, Salamullahi alayh, who was killed by Wahshi at the command of Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan, who lost her father and her brother and her son in the battle of Badr. So she avenged their death by killing Hamza. Then she came to the body of Hamza, mutilated it, cut off his fingers, cut off his ears, cut off his nose, made a necklace out of it, and she put it around her neck, wal-'iyadhu billah. And then she cut out the heart and the liver of Hamza, and she chewed the liver, but Allah did not allow her to swallow it, so she threw it out of her mouth. So the Muslims suffered greatly, unfortunately, and many of them were killed. But because of the perseverance of Imam Ali and Rasulullah, and a few handful, not more than 5 individuals remained with the Prophet, including a woman by the name of Nasibah. When she saw the men running away, they left Rasulullah. She picked up a sword and started defending Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, such that she endured so many heavy wounds that it took 1 year for her wounds to cure. But then they managed to save Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Imam Ali, and brought back the Prophet safe to Medina. Although the Prophet himself was wounded, his tooth was broken, Imam Ali suffered the wounds. Abu Sufyan, on his way back celebrating his victory, then paused and told the army, "What made us stop? We should have gone back to Medina and destroyed the Muslims. I mean, they ran away, their morale is crushed. Why not go back and finish them once and for all?" So they decided to go back to Medina. The Prophet heard the news. He got up and he said, "Only those people who were wounded are allowed to come and join me to defend." A handful of people got up. Handful. The news reached Abu Sufyan that the Prophet has come with a handful of people. He could not believe it. He said, "It's impossible that he's bringing us only a handful of people to fight an entire army." And then he got worried, Abu Sufyan. He said, "Maybe this man has a plan. He wants to deceive us, thinking that only these few individuals are coming, but rather he has an army behind him, and they will do a trap and turn our victory into a loss." So he got feared and scared, and he told the mushrikeen, "Let's go back to Quraysh. Forget about it. Let's not turn our victory into a loss." And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved Islam through the nobility and the bravery of the Prophet and those few individuals who fought with him. And that's why the Quran commends them in Surah Ali Imran in saying, "حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل فانقلبوا بنعمة من الله وفضل لم يمسسهم سوء." Whenever you're faced with a fear or difficulty, you say, "حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل," and Allah inshallah will protect you and save you. So the Prophet then came back to Medina, victorious from that second incident. Muslims initially who thought that the Prophet was killed in Uhud, they returned back. And there were over 60 verses revealed in Surah Ali Imran blaming the Muslims for letting the Prophet down and saying, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ. Muhammad is not but a messenger. قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ رُسُلٌ. Other messengers have come before him. أَفَإِنْ مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلْ. So if he dies or gets killed, you revert back. In other words, the Muslims, many of them, when they thought that the Prophet was killed, they thought about reverting back to shirk wal-'iyadhu billah, so that Quraysh would accept them back. They changed. Their faith was shaken. So Allah condemned them for this, blamed them for these actions. Over 60 verses in the Quran and Surah Al-Imran were revealed about this incident and the Battle of Uhud. But unfortunately, it left heavy wounds in the hearts of the Muslims. Many of them were weeping and crying. The Prophet came by a house that was weeping and crying, and he said, "Why don't then people weep and cry for my uncle Al-Hamza?" This is mentioned in Tarikh al-Tabari. So the Prophet, he encouraged people to commemorate the death of Hamza, not just by crying, but yandubun, which means they show their emotions, either by beating their chests or beating their heads or by crying out loudly. And hence it is also the sunnah of the Prophet to weep for Imam al-Hussein salamullahi alayhi, as he himself, according to Ibn Hajar al-Haythami in his Sawa'iq al-Muhriqa, says that the Prophet cried for Imam al-Hussein salamullahi alayhi. This happened in the 3rd year after Hijrah, and inshallah in future episodes we'll talk more about some of the other events that took place in the holy city of Medina. May Allah bless you from the holy city of Medina. May Allah grant us the ziyarah of Rasulullah and his shafa'ah in dunya, in the qabr, in the akhirah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.